This is Eitan Shalom at the BodyMind Wellness Center. I would like to talk a little bit about the concept of dosha in Ayurveda. What your dosha is, what it means. Well, we describe your dosha in Ayurveda as your body-mind type. Your body-mind type. But what does this mean to have a body-mind type? It describes a combination of physical, mental, and emotional or psychological characteristics that fit a particular pattern, and that is a pattern that is predictable and coherent. And it both describes your nature and also the way that if you don't live a lifestyle and have a diet that's appropriate to your nature, the way in which you will become ill. In fact, the word dosha in Sanskrit means fault, mistake. In other words, your dosha is the way that you'll become ill. It's not a negative thing. It describes all of your strengths, all of your characteristics that are neither good nor bad, such as whether you have a large boned frame or a fine boned frame. Neither of those is inherently good or bad. They're good for some things and good for other things. But it also describes how someone who's has a fiery personality type will be more easily hot-tempered than someone who has a naturally watery or earthy body-mind type. So your dosha is your body-mind type. It describes your physical body, the way your body's going to work, whether you'll have easy digestion, strong digestion, or weak digestion, whether you'll be strong or weak, whether you'll tend to prefer cold or hot, a slew of things. Almost anything you can think of involving a human being will be described by your dosha. It will also describe the way that you can become ill, the most logical, predictable ways in which you can become ill. And it, in turn, is a guide for the kind of diet that will keep your dosha pacified and the kind of lifestyle that will keep your dosha pacified. And by lifestyle, we don't mean whether you have a healthy lifestyle or an unhealthy lifestyle per se, in that simply like that, because we mean that you have a healthy lifestyle that's specifically healthy for your dosha. So, for example, in the U.S., especially Southern California, a lot of people think of a healthy lifestyle as drinking lots of green vegetable smoothies. And that might be okay for somebody with the Pitta dosha, but it's going to be horrible for someone with the Vata dosha. Because Vata doshas tend to get cold very easily and be on the weak side. So let's now talk about the specific doshas. There are three building blocks, let's say, and actually there's actually 5 building blocks, but there are 3 building blocks to dosha: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Everything that you can say about Vata dosha is everything that you could say by observing the qualities of wind or air and space in nature, in the natural world. So when we talk about dosha, what we're talking about is the expression in human beings of the natural world in a human. It's true that there is not anything in the natural world that you cannot describe in terms of the qualities of air, space, fire, water, and earth. Before there were microscopes, and even after the telescope doesn't change anything, But before there were microscopes, but even now, if you don't want to get into the details of physics and chemistry, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what you can observe. There isn't anything that doesn't have that isn't comprised of the natural elements. That's just what we have in the universe. So if we look out into space, we have outer space, which is space. We have, and space is really etheric. There, you can go vast distances in space where there's nothing between. It's almost a vacuum. It's slightly different than a actual vacuum, but there's a term for it in science, the kind of vacuum that exists in space. But if you travel for a light year and there's only one hydrogen atom, that's a virtual vacuum. And then what else is in space? Fire, right? Fire, stars, super intense fire. Fire that's so intense that its light travels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and what's the properties of space? Space is incredibly cold, incredibly light. What's the property of stars? Incredibly hot, incredibly light, and of course they have great mass. Let's come back down to Earth. If we look at the soil, if we look at the Earth itself, what is the Earth comprised of? Well, that's an easy one. Earth. It's heavy. It's got weight to it. This tree here, this beautiful old pepper tree, grows out of the earth. But if we look at that tree and we, saw it open, then we'll see that there are spaces in it, and we'll see that there's water in the tree. So that a tree, like a human, has in it water, space, earth, like the cellulose, the fibers. And then, if you want to be a little bit poetic, it also has wind. It also has air. Well, I said air and space, but when the tree grows up into the air and the leaves move in the wind, the leaves have a kind of a quality of air in that they're very light and etheric. And then when a tree flowers, those beautiful bright colors, are they more like water, more like earth, more like air? No, they're more like fire. And so everything you can say about the doshas are the things that you could say about space, air, fire, water, and earth in the natural world. And that's really important, because if you want to really think about Ayurveda correctly, forget your science, don't do fake Ayurveda, and don't do fake science. When you do science, do real science, in my opinion. But to do real Ayurveda, stick to the logic of Ayurveda, which is pre-modern. Don't be ashamed of that. There's a lot of value to the pre-modern. I listen to Bach. Bach is pre-modern. I listen to Gregorian chant. I listen to Indian classical music, all pre-modern. So, okay, now, the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Everything you can say about Vata dosha is everything you can say about wind and space. We usually don't use the word air. We use the word wind because it's the properties of air, especially as wind. And you'll see in a minute. So Vata dosha is everything you can say about wind and space. Pitta dosha is everything you can say about fire and a little bit water, but that mostly comes into play in terms of fiery liquids in the body, like saliva and digestive enzymes. So just think fire for Pitta. And then Kapha dosha is everything you can say about earth and water both. And that's an interesting one because it's earth and water, both of which are very heavy, right? What weighs more, earth, water, on this planet? Because I don't actually know when it comes to the weight of stars. So on Earth, what weighs more? Air, fire, water, earth, water and earth do. So they share that quality in common, the heaviness. So everything you can say about Kapha dosha is everything you can say about earth and water. So there's 3 doshas. Does that mean there's only 3 kinds of people? Of course not. First of all, there are 10 doshas. The least common is what's called tridoshic. That's a human being who has equal amounts of each of the 3 doshas in their makeup. You try to figure them out, and then you realize nothing predominates. And that's actually the most ideal dosha, because the doshas naturally then balance each other. Obviously, fire and water have a balancing effect on each other. Fire and air do not. And that's very important, and we'll talk about that later. But, so first dosha type, or I should say the last, is tridoshic. The second less common are people that are overwhelmingly, predominantly a single dosha. So they're either overwhelmingly Vata, like this friend of mine who's 6'4" and weighs 165 pounds. I mean, he looks like, and he walks like the Tin Man. So, that's somebody that I always think of and in terms of an overwhelming Vata type by his body, his frame. So you could have somebody who's overwhelmingly Pitta type, etc., overwhelmingly Kapha. But then most of us are a combination of a primary dosha and secondary dosha. So, and let me just say that all of us are comprised of all 3 doshas. Nobody doesn't have one of the doshas, because each of the doshas corresponds to particular tissues in the body. So Kapha corresponds to the flesh, right? The muscles and the bones. Well, we all have muscles. We all have muscles, right? But some people have, sorry, my nose itches. I'm on a walk and there's some things in the air. We all have muscles, but some people have naturally big, thick muscles. Some people have naturally really small, weak muscles, and some people have very wiry muscles. So we all have muscles. So we all have all 3 doshas, but the majority of us have a primary dosha and a secondary dosha. So we could be Vata Pitta or Pitta Vata. We could be Vata Kapha or Kapha Vata. We could be Pitta Kapha or Kapha Pitta. So a Vata Pitta is predominantly Vata, secondarily Pitta. And those are the 2 doshas that typically are going to be most significant for that person in terms of predicting what they need to do in order to take good care of themselves, and also predicting exactly how they'll become ill if they don't take good care of themselves. It also is a good way of understanding yourself, especially, we're raised in a society where there's certain ideals that we're all supposed to be like, and it can be very dispiriting if you're not naturally the way that our society would like you to be. So, for example, kids who are hyperactive, and have difficulty paying attention. On the other hand, those kids sometimes can be the most creative kids, and they might be very successful musicians or artists because they also often have hyper focus with things that they're interested in. And those people are most often Vata dosha, Vata predominant, and often Pitta secondary. And so knowing what you're like, knowing what your dosha is kind of can be helpful if you're the kind of person that beats yourself up for not being a particular way. And it's part of that picture of understanding yourself. Okay, this is the hand that I've been dealt with by creation. This is the kind of body-mind type I have. So this is what I better do, and if I want to be successful in life as a human being. So now let's go back to Vata dosha. So everything you can say Actually, I think I'm going to stop there. It's 15 minutes. The next thing I'm going to talk about, but it's going to be another video, is the specifics of Vata dosha, Pitta dosha, Kapha dosha, and how they combine. And the starting point for that, if you want to think about it ahead of time, is to understand that, again, everything we could say about Vata dosha in the body and in the mind is an expression of what we could say in terms of the qualities of space and wind in nature. Vata types are naturally cold, they're naturally fast, they're naturally dry, for example. Pitta, everything you can say about fire, penetrating intellect, hot-tempered, strong digestion, strong fire. And then Kapha and earth, everything you can say about, Kapha, everything you can say about water and earth, naturally solid, naturally strong, naturally slow, naturally easygoing, naturally sweet, and we'll take it from there. There's a lot more detail to go over there, but that's the starting point. So once you start using doshas, the idea of the dosha in your daily life and in your self-understanding, it becomes really clear over time. It's the hardest thing about understanding Ayurveda or Chinese medicine is that it's a different way of thinking. It's not actually difficult material in the way that calculus or classical music or the theory of functional harmony or analyzing a difficult novel. It's not actually harder than any of that. It's just that for us Westerners, it's a completely different way of thinking. And so thank you for tuning in, and to be continued in the next talk, which is going to be how I might do one for each dosha. That'll probably make most sense. What is Vata dosha, and how does it affect you? What is the diet and lifestyle to keep your Vata dosha pacified? Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.